Previously, there was only a small vacuum effect on far standing heavy. If you got a counter hit with this attack, you'd be +9, allowing you to link into things like your crouching medium or standing medium. However, if you wanted to link into a proximity normal, that would be a little more technical because you'd have to get close enough to where the vacuum effect actually pulled them in. But if you're pressing this at ranges where you're likely to press it, then you would never really get an opportunity to capitalize on a counter hit with a triple strike sequence. Instead, your combos would usually end with a cancel from one of your medium normals into a special move. Now, the vacuum effect on counter hit is much greater, pretty much guaranteeing that you'll always be able to link into a close range normal. It's possible to get a close heavy here, but it is a pretty tight gap. So if you're under match duress and you want to ensure that you're going to combo here, you should go for a medium, just to make sure that you're not whiffing here. Plus, there are still some ranges where you don't get a close proximity normal and instead will get a far normal. In these cases, far M is always going to connect, whereas your far heavy with 10 frame startup is going to be too slow to combo. I know I got close heavy there, but the frame data supports me. Lucilius's 5U, his Orbital Resonance, has a bit of a rework in the current patch. Previously, the moment you entered the stance, you would generate blade level. And that was pretty much the only benefit that you received when in the stance, outside of course, of your unique stance moves. At high levels of play, Lucilius players would largely just use this stance intermittently. If the opponent was playing passively with you in neutral, then you would enter the stance just to build a little bit of free blade level, approaching that level 5 power spike a little faster. It did not interact with any of your cooldowns previously. Whatever blade level you were at determined how long your cooldowns were. Additionally, there was about 18 frames of recovery. So it was a fairly safe option to go into and flicker out of. But it could cost you in case you did this a little too close to the opponent and if they were too aggressive. Now, Orbital Resonance has a couple of different behaviors to make it a more consistently usable tool in Lucilius's kit. Now, for the first 30 frames of the move's activation, you don't generate any blade level, but after that, you generate a little bit of blade level, with the rate increasing until it caps out after 90 frames. So in a match, you're not actually going to really get a whole lot of access to the fastest generation of blade level here, but if the opponent, for whatever reason, dilly-dallies in approaching you, you can potentially build up a free blade level just from the opponent being a little too absent-minded. In addition to that, it's worth noting that your blade level generation does stop, as it did before, when you use one of the follow-ups here. So that behavior hasn't changed at all. Also worth mentioning is that now you can cancel a move 6 frames faster, meaning that instead of being -18, we're -12. This basically means if the opponent moves in any sort of way, you can cancel and reasonably react to about anything that the opponent throws out at you. There are still going to be some situations and ranges where the opponent can punish you for going into this stance, but it should be a safer thing for you to do more often. The last interesting thing to talk about is actually how Orbital Resonance interacts with your cooldowns now. As I mentioned before, previously, there was no change to your cooldowns while Orbital Resonance was active. Now, we can see how the cooldown ticks through this moment. If I go to Orbital Resonance, you can see just how much faster my fireball regenerates. It cuts the cooldown time of your special moves in half. So this basically means that Lucilius is able to tap into Orbital Resonance at times and quickly reduce the cooldowns of his various special moves, bringing them online faster, which means he's able to use them more often, generate blade level more often, present some of his best threats more often, and this also means that once you hit blade level 5, Orbital Resonance doesn't become just like a useless tool. There's actually still some utility to be had here. After all, I can go into Orbital Resonance and reduce my cooldowns, getting them online just that much faster in some situations. All of these are really great changes to Orbital Resonance, but they made the deal even better thanks to adjustments to the follow-ups. Let's get into the Orbital Resonance follow-ups now, which all have received buffs, starting with the light version. Previously, it only had 6 active frames. So while it looked like it covered a great deal of screen, it didn't really have too much activity to it. The opponent could usually run right through this projectile while it was on screen, meaning that this was a subpar poke for Lucilius to use. Now, the light version of Orbital Resonance has 5 more active frames, going from 6 to 11. As a result of this, you see that the projectile has a lot more range to it. It's not quite full screen since they do deaccelerate the projectile towards the end of it, but now it should actually have a fairly active hitbox. That means the opponent has to respect this as a secondary fireball that Lucilius can throw. Night and day difference from the previous example. Now for the medium version, it's a plus on block option that is great for Lucilius to reset his pressure with. However, the range on it was really what killed this move. Yeah, I'm +2 here, and you're within my medium range. But outside of just going for a very disrespectful long stagger window here, if I try to use this out in neutral, I really only just put you into range for a few of my normals. Not really able to initiate any sort of strong strike throw game from this. Now, the vacuum effect on the medium orbital resonance follow-up has been increased. While at this range, the opponent isn't quite within your close proximity normal range, they are also now within range of your 2M, increasing the option that you have. And of course, if you get a little close to the opponent, this means that the effective range, which you're able to draw the opponent in and then initiate close proximity normal pressure, has been greatly increased. This is a very nice change for Lucilius as well. Now for the heavy follow-up to Orbital Resonance, which has a nice range buff to it. Previously, it didn't reach from round start distance. This sort of encapsulates the problem, I think, that existed with Orbital Resonance before. This is an option that Lucilius players would tend to go to at these long to mid ranges, just so they could steal a little bit of time to get free blade level. But then the actual options that Lucilius could fight you with were pretty subpar at these ranges. Now let's take a look at the increased range of heavy Orbital Resonance. As you can see, it now reaches from round start. The patch notes themselves specify that this only occurs to opponents who are farther away from Lucilius. But generally, this should mean that it is a better poke overall for you to use in neutral. As I mentioned just recently, the problem with Orbital Resonance was that some of the best ranges for you to use it were also some of the weakest ranges for the options that you could use out of Orbital Resonance. But now all those ranges and tools feel stronger at this ideal range, which I think greatly improved this move's versatility in Lucilius's kit. Now we move on to the Heavy Iblis buffs. Previously, Heavy Iblis had a very slow startup coming out of frame 39. This wasn't too bad since, again, you were namely using this to create a gap in your pressure and to just put the opponent underneath some duress with the immense amount of block stun that you had. However, it was also a very stubby fireball. So you generally only use this to lock the opponent down. Additionally, the combo utility of this move was lacking in a lot of cases. If you got a counter hit close heavy before, you could not combo into Heavy Iblis. Now let's take a look at the buffs to Heavy Iblis. It's now 5 frames faster, starting at frame 34. This means that it should be able to be easier to weave into your pressure and be slightly more threatening there. But the big appeal of this change is going to be to how it interacts on a close heavy counter hit. You can now combo this, which means that you just have more punish options available to you against the opponent's DP when you bait it. You can now get in a second close heavy attack and then go into a triple strike sequence. This will greatly improve Lucilius' damage when he does get a close heavy counter hit, provided he has Iblis off cooldown, of course. The last change to note with the move is its increased travel distance. As you can see here, it now will reach from round start distance. It's not a big change or anything like that. It's still a fairly short-reaching fireball, but that's the intent of this version of the move after all. It should just be a little more effective at some ranges for Lucilius at least. The ultimate version of Iblis also has a buff, though I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to effectively demonstrate the utility here. It used to be smaller on the very first active frame. As you can see here, I don't really see anything until the projectile itself becomes active. With a larger hitbox, this should just mean that it's going to interact with the opponent sooner, potentially meaning that there's going to be new combo routes for Lucilius or other opportunities for him to use this tool. I think at this range we were connecting with the fireball at frame 19, and now we're connecting at frame 18 by virtue of that expanded first active frame. This one is a very hard detail to notice, I think, so maybe a more experienced Lucilius player that has been able to do a deep dive into this tech change can enlighten us in the comments below. The medium version of Iscariot has a buff to its travel speed and distance. This was the old distance. While it was a fast option coming out of frame 17, it did have some very low range. So you generally have to use this at mid-ranges, meaning that it basically existed within the same range as your far medium poke at times. Now let's see the new travel distance and speed for medium Iscariot. It's a little better, meaning that there should be more effective ranges where you can threaten with this move in neutral. And I think it's going to be ranges that surpass the range of your far M. So now there's actually some mid-range utility for this move, as opposed to let me just run in and try and get a free blade level or start off a game-winning combo at level 5. Previously, the heavy version of Iscariot only had one difference from the medium Iscariot, and that was its startup. Heavy was 19 frames. Medium was 17 frames. Both were -4 on block. And at blade level 1, they both did a base 1900 damage. There really wasn't a difference between these two moves, so you could almost interchange them in your combos. Generally going for the medium version because it was faster and more likely to link as opposed to the heavy, which could drop in some specific cases. To differentiate its function in Lucilius' kit from the medium version of Iscariot, heavy Iscariot has been completely reworked. Let's take a look at the new properties. It's much slower now, starting up at 29 frames instead of 19 frames. However, check out that +6 on block. This is now a pressure tool for Lucilius to use in his offense. If you don't have Iblis to create yourself some plus frames, you could just go for the heavy version of Iscariot, and maybe if you time this correctly, you could catch the opponent fidgeting and trying to jump out and then just get a normal combo. The properties on hit haven't changed at all. You still generate the same blade level and do the same amount of damage as you do with the medium version. So the appeal of this move isn't hitting the opponent, it's making them block it. The travel speed and range have also been reduced. As I'm sure you can tell the difference right there. It's also worth noting that they've increased the whiff recovery. It now takes a total of 58 frames from start to finish for the move to complete. Compare that to the medium version, which takes 37 frames. So the idea of this is that you got a big slow move that the opponent could potentially react to, but if they don't and if they block it, it's your turn again with Lucilius. I think that this is pretty much fine. It basically gives Lucilius a new move in his kit while maintaining the identity of the other move anyway. So yeah, it is a change, and maybe if you got used to using heavy in your combo structure, you'll have to relearn it a bit, but it's a shift of one button. It's not going to be that big of a deal. And even though it's not going to be anything I think that completely overhauls the character, having another tool in your arsenal is pretty nice. I still think that most of the time players are going to opt for the medium version because that's their combo tool. It's going to get them a single level of blade, but there could be some niche applications for this tool, and I think Lucilius appreciates having more differentiated versions of his special moves than he does having, duplicate versions of them. He feels a little more complete now. The last change of Lucilius is to Light Tessera, which previously took a total of 39 frames to complete. Now the recovery for Light Tessera has been reduced by 3 frames. So here we see that after 36 frames, Lucilius completes the move. This just means that the move is more effective as an approach tool, since the opponent has less time to react and Lucilius can be potentially safer in some situations. A nice little change. In patch 2.50, almost every character we've looked at so far has received some combination of buffs and nerfs. Lucilius is the one character we've looked at so far that is just straight up buffed across the board with no compensation nerfs in sight for it. I think he is strictly a better character in this version of the game, and I don't think many people would disagree with me. And I like a lot of these changes. When Lucilius first released, he was a very one-dimensional character. Speedrun to blade level 5. They tried to slow down how you could get there as fast, and they tried to encourage you to use his 5U more, but those things didn't really work out for Lucilius. And after those changes, Castiel was the one Lucilius player that I watched that was incorporating Orbital Resonance consistently into his playstyle. But after these changes, I think that Orbital Resonance has potential to be bread and butter gameplay for Lucilius mains going forward. And it's in a super interesting way too. And it also does it in a way where, because it now reduces your cooldown timer, if you have multiple skills on cooldowns, the value you get from Orbital Resonance increases because you're decreasing more of your cooldowns. So I think this can encourage a very, skill spammy play style and allows players to also fight at that range with Orbital Resonance that used to be kind of like a weak point for them. You wanted to be at mid-range far away from the opponent, but you couldn't interact with them in meaningful ways with Orbital Resonance. But now you can, thanks to the buffs to all 3 of those skills. And I think that's really cool. Not sure what to think of the heavy Iscariot change just yet. I think it's a net buff for Lucilius because now he has a new effective move and another way of getting plus frames in these situations. I don't think it's going to see a whole lot of use just because of how important it is for Lucilius to use the medium version of Iscariot to increase his blade level faster. But maybe as time goes on and more optimal flow charts for Lucilius are established thanks to these changes, heavy Iscariot can find a niche application within his kit. Honestly, I'm hopeful that we see a few more Lucilius players return to the character because I think this version of the character is probably the most complete version that the game has yet to see, and I'm a big fan of his design and playstyle, so I'm hoping that players give him a look in this patch. I think he's really cool.